Welcome to the Legends of Iron. I'm Jon Anderson. Meet my co-hosts Nick Best and Akeem Williams. We're going to have some amazing guests on the show. Buckle up tight because we're going to be talking about the shit you're not supposed to be talking about. We're going to be discussing anything and everything it takes to become a Legend of Iron.
Legends of Iron is brought to you by Musclements. Musclements is the creator of Carnivore Pure Beef Protein Isolates. Beef builds muscle, and Carnivore is the world's #1 selling beef protein.
Welcome to another edition of Legends of Iron. I'm Jon Anderson. As always with me, my partners in crime, Nick Best and Akeem Williams. We have got a killer show for you. We have got a show that is amazing because we have got a guest that he literally embodies success. You go to the nearest dictionary and you look up the word success, you're going to find his picture every goddamn time. We're talking business. We're talking, he's a pro bodybuilder. He's set world records in powerlifting. And if I was swinging from the other side of the plate, he would be my guy. Stan Efferding, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, brother. What an introduction. I really don't know where to go with that from there.
well, I'll tell you, what I'm dying to know, and I'm sure what everybody else is dying to know, is you clearly have forgive the term secret, but you've got some methodologies to your madness and how you're so successful in everything you do. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, to be honest with you, a lot of us have that type A personality, in order to be in sports. I find that amongst a lot of athletes that I work with now. Plus, I had a bit of ADHD. I just thrived in environments where I could repeat certain behaviors every day. And bodybuilding, powerlifting really, lent itself well to that kind of personality. All of the daily routines, the checklists, the repeat this, repeat that, day in, day out, hours of sleep, number of meals, workouts, the progressions, planning, recording, tracking, that just lent itself well to me. And so it's been a long journey. I've tried to find out from everybody I could over the years and everything I could read, if there were any tips or tricks or secrets, and I would love to share those with folks. But to be honest, this is a matter of just busting your ass, rewind, repeat. And I found the same thing to be true in business. And I've said that in a rant of mine. I said, anybody who's successful, highly successful athlete, the same amount of discipline, time management, consistency that you pour into becoming a great athlete in any sport, if you were to put that same amount of energy into any income producing venture, you'd be a millionaire within 5 years. Just wake up every morning and grind and keep repeating the same behaviors that have shown you success. Absolutely. I don't think business is any different than sport in that regard.
Yeah, I would say, clearly I've heard you say that in the past, that, if you're successful in a sport, you take that effort, you take the commitment and you apply it to business, that you're going to be very successful very quickly. So your kind of commitment sounds like it's kind of one of the underlying factors in this whole thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And, to be honest, the training was always the fun part. That's the easy part. We love that. It's just, once you get hooked on that's you want to go to the gym all the time. It's outside the gym, having the discipline and consistency to do the things that allow you to recover from and prepare for the next bout of training. That was the piece that I was really doggedly consistent with, and mainly as a matter of necessity, because I was undersized. I was 140 pounds as a 18-year-old freshman in college, and all the guys I were training with were much bigger, and I had dreams and goals and aspirations of being a bodybuilder, a pro bodybuilder. And when you're, back in 1985, if you wanted to be a pro bodybuilder at 6 feet tall, all there was a heavyweight class, and you needed to be 250 pounds of shredded muscle in order to get that one pro card they offered every year to the overall winner of the USA, or the 3 they offered every year at the nationals to the 3 classes that were there. They offered 4 pro cards a year. And so the top amateurs were deep, and any amateur that won a pro show back in the late 80s and early 90s, like the Flex Wheelers and the rest of that group, they would immediately that same year place in the top 10 in the Olympia. They were that good because there were so many guys vying for so few pro cards. I benefited, of course, from the Masters division. I turned pro at 40. But I was the best I had ever been because I had taken advantage of all the things I had learned, and I had reached out to great coaches. That was when I trained with Flex Wheeler. And so I encourage everybody to get a coach and just to keep learning and keep, working hard and understanding that this process takes a decade or two. It's not a lot of guys now. They're like, oh, I want to compete in a couple shows and get my pro card within 2 years. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it seems like on that level, you sought out Flex Wheeler to get your pro card in bodybuilding. Then you went to Mark Bell for powerlifting. So it seems like going to those resources is definitely a part of your formula. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I've probably worked with just about every guru in the business. Trained with Charles Glass and trained with Eddie Cohn in powerlifting. I worked with some really great bodybuilders over the years and powerlifters, and it's just a who's who. Every opportunity you get to glean information from these folks or to train with them to take you to another level, is really the return on that investment is fantastic. I think everybody should. Nowadays with social media, you could train out of your garage and there is a lot more information, of course, available on the internet than there used to be. We didn't have the internet back when I was starting out. It was the guy behind the counter at Gold's Gym who was eating tuna fish from a can, and rice cakes was about all of the nutrition information you had. So it was a long, slow, self-taught road of mistake after mistake after mistake. But geez, nowadays you jump on the internet, and if you find the right people, it's just great that you got a podcast here talking to the people who have done it and at a very high level. Then it's much easier, I think, now to succeed much sooner, but it still takes a hell of a long time to build the size and strength necessary to compete at a top level.
Yeah, knowledge-wise, I think you're going to save people about 15 years. I mean, how long did we go after it in that era we had to learn it for ourselves and then get mentoring from other people. I mean, Bull Stewart and Eddie Cohen are 2 of mine that I learned from. And I learned a lot from both of those men, a lot.
Yeah, Bull Stewart, there's a name. I went up to his gym, it's been 10 plus years ago up in Seattle. Mm-hmm. Those are some great experiences. Every opportunity that we had, we'd try and go work out with someone who was in the know, who had kind of lived it, because there was no other resource.
Yeah. It was really neat because at Nationals, and I think 94, I brought my workout journal with me. And Bull asked to look at it, and he started lining through things, telling me, this is too much. This is where you need to do this. He goes, all you need to do is put 100 pounds on your total every single year, and eventually you're going to end up beating everybody. And 96 and 97 is when I won Nationals and Worlds. So, yeah, he was right. It was kind of neat.
It's funny because when you start out, like I went and got Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, like most of us did. You end up working out for 3 hours a day, doing 30 sets, 7 days a week, and trying to eat a pre-contest diet, like I mentioned, tuna and rice cakes. And then as you get older, you're like, damn, I didn't need to do all that. I just needed to be a little smarter about my training and more consistent outside the gym about my recovery.
Right.
Yeah. Right. But those times when we were we were working way too hard, and we were, it was almost like, for me, I'd throw that was like when I developed my discipline, because you're tired. You're overtrained. You don't know it, but you force yourself to keep going, and you have to have that ability to force yourself to keep going when you don't want to. That's part of the formula for sure. So, yeah, although it was a terrible mistake, there was a lot that was gained from the period of doing far too much.
Oh, agreed. You know, I get a lot of guys that come to me now that are up in years, that have been training for 20, 30 years, and they're not competing anymore. And they still try and do the stuff that they always did. And it's really hard to recover from. So I redesign a lot of training programs like Bull did for, for Nick, as just mentioned, to lessen fatigue. One of the things that we're learning recently with the research is that you don't have to take yourself to failure, at all or nearly as much. And in powerlifting, and I think that, this kind of worked its way out through the information we got from Westside and Louis Simmons, is you don't need to max out as often, and you don't need to repeat the same kind of movement pattern, say a heavy hinged squat and a heavy hinged deadlift, which is what a deadlift is anyhow, a hinge. If you're a low bar squatter and you're deadlifting in the same week, that's the same exercise, and you're doing 85 plus, probably 90% of your 1 rep max every single week. I was fortunate to have kind of recognized that when I was training with Mark Bell. And my program at the time, I squatted once 1 week and deadlifted once the next week, heavy. So I was squatting twice a month, to be honest, heavy, and deadlifting twice a month, heavy. And understanding, of course, I had already reached an elite level. And so I was, the loads were significant. This isn't a starting
massive
program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have been able to recover from anything more than that if I had tried to squat and deadlift in the same week. And so I redesign programs. And when I work with athletes now whose focus is not powerlifting or bodybuilding, Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles, or working with John Jones now.
I got a bunch of questions about that.
They've got a different sport to play. Lifting isn't their sport, and if it can't make them better, you certainly don't want to. They have limited physical. Yeah. They have limited physical capital, and you can't load them with fatigue in the gym that takes away from their ability to do their sport-specific work. And so, much like the dad bods or the retired, I'll say, guys who are up in age that aren't competing anymore, I design programs to have less fatigue. You can still get the hypertrophy benefit. You can maintain a significant amount of strength with much less volume, just by changing the loading parameters, not, doing more concentric work, repetitions under heavy hinged loads, axial loading, squats, and deadlifts. You can get an incredible benefit out of some leg presses and hack squats, and a lot of upper back movements and chest stuff doesn't give you a ton of fatigue, and just try and give people a break from themselves, because I tried that for many years after I stopped competing. I tried to go to the gym and keep crushing myself just as a matter of habit, and it didn't bode well for me.
I have that problem all the time, brother. That's a hard habit to break, man.
Yeah.
Who's broken the habit?
My question.
I haven't broke that habit yet.
Yeah. And that's why I specifically mentioned people who are retired from competing, because I know that Nick's still out there crushing it. He's a unique individual that way. And,
but the thing is what you're talking about the once every other week, I only pull from the floor heavy once every 3 weeks.
Right.
And then the next week I'll pull reps, and then the next week I'll do like block pulls, something that's high. I only squat heavy once every 3 weeks.
Right.
And then the next week I'll squat light and do some reps. And the next week I'll do like a Hatfield squat or something else to work my full range of motion. So what you're talking about is stuff that I've been doing for years, and is what's kept me in one piece till I can still do this.
Keeping in the game, baby. That's right.
Yeah.
Our audience only sees, our social media audience only sees the top sets. And so they don't understand the infrequency or again, all of the volume work that we do behind the scenes that allows us to recover, which is critical. I think that when I was coming up in the 90s, I used to have this philosophy: don't run if you can walk, don't stand if you can sit, and don't stay awake if you can sleep. And I found that the only reason I was able to really do that back then is because I was bodybuilding for 4 or 5 months to get ready for a show, and then I would transition into powerlifting, and there was a carryover effect from all the bodybuilding volume that I did. In the absence of that, if you're just a strongman or a powerlifter and you're lifting heavy all the time and not doing a lot of recuperatory and preparatory volume behind the scenes, which you should, I think that it starts to wear on you at a much greater rate than it would on somebody who does all of that movement. So we do a lot of moving, and that's kind of the foundation again of Louis Simmons' program. I wasn't aware of that because I never trained with Louis until I met Mark Bell in 2009. And then the last couple of years of my powerlifting competitions, I didn't compete in bodybuilding. So I did a lot less bodybuilding volume, and I was powerlifting for longer periods of time, maintaining both my heavy body weight and the heavy loading. And it weighed really heavy on me. And as I look back, as I reflect now, I can directly attribute my lack of improvement. I don't think I improved those last 2 years. I was just kind of stagnant to my decreased volume. And as you age, you need more accessory volume.
Yes, you do. Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, Stan, turn the corner a little bit. Talk to us about, I know Nick already mentioned, you've been doing some really interesting stuff with Jon Jones. He's transitioning to heavyweight. So obviously your goal is to get him big and strong, but yet, like you mentioned before, only take up a certain amount of his, I think you mentioned physical capital. I love how you described that, but ultimately you've got to have his weight training fit into his repertoire where it's helping his overall performance move forward. So please talk to us about that.
Yeah, we implement some kind of common things that we're all aware of in the industry. I think one in particular, we split our training. So we'll do an AM workout and a PM workout. We don't want to grind anybody for 2 hours straight. You just dig too deep a hole, too hard to recover from. So we'll do 2 workouts a day. It's the same way I trained with Flex when I was getting ready for pro bodybuilding competitions. We do an AM PM workout. It lent itself better. You can train long or you can train hard, but you can't do both. And so we would get the necessary volume, but we would split it up. So we had, 2 meals and a nap in between training sessions. These are things I used to see even back in the early 90s when I would drive from Oregon down to LA to Venice just to watch guys train and just try and pick minds and ask questions. They all trained twice a day. They all ate 6+ times a day, mainly because they had a high caloric demand and they needed that many meals just to be able to consume that many calories. Not that 6 is better than 4, but just because they were eating a lot of food. They all napped every afternoon. They all slept 8+ hours a night. That was the thing that I found to be very consistent about all of them. And most of their volume was in that 8 to 15 rep range. Not that you can't get just an equivalent hypertrophy benefit from a heavy 5 rep set or even a lighter 20 rep set, but you get less fatigue in that mid range. And since they wanted to increase their frequency and volume, that seemed to be what people were able to do more consistently if the bulk of their volume was in that mid range. So our first goal with Jon was to put muscle on him because he had a considerable amount of time before he intended to fight, and he wanted to add lean muscle to his physique to go from 205 to the 265 class. And so it was mostly bodybuilding training, but in a concurrent training model, you don't want to get detrained in any of your other sport-specific demands, such as speed and power. So we were moving weights fast, but we were still getting an adequate amount of, minimum effective volume, and certainly within a rep or two of failure. And a lot of those reps were in, again, that 8 to 15 range, and trained everything twice a week, just a standard bodybuilding style program just to add muscle. But we we kept touching on an occasional, we'd get him up to a top single, say on a, on a box squat, something that wasn't quite as fatiguing as burying a full range squat, or a bench press with chains or something like that. So, and we were also including some speed work, and so we wouldn't compromise his speed. We brought in a trainer, a friend of mine out of Cincinnati, who was a strength and conditioning coach for Pittsburgh and then for Detroit up there. And he brought in an overspeed treadmill. And some of you might have seen videos of Jon running on an overspeed treadmill. And
yes,
it's fantastic for increasing speed while minimizing fatigue. Because if you run on a track, once you reach full speed, everything else is a decelerating force. It's an eccentric load catching your body with your quad. And we really use the sprinting for ankle stiffness, which is important for explosive power. We used it for posterior chain, which is what sprinters have a lot of, glutes and hamstrings. A lot of people tend to work the brakes a lot and not the gas pedal, and the hamstrings and glutes are really the gas pedal for exploding, for double leg takedown. People think it's quads, but it's not. It's hip extension. It's how quickly you can accelerate and get underneath somebody. So we kept a lot of that in, so it's a pretty diverse program. And we have to manage fatigue. So another component of that is stacking fatigue. On heavy MMA days, meaning a live wrestling day is going to be a high fatigue day. We'll also do a high fatigue weight training workout in the morning. So we stack his fatigue on the same day. Powerlifters might do the same by squatting in the morning and deadlifting at night, and the next day just be doing, some upper back lat pull downs, et cetera, that aren't quite as fatiguing, so that systemically they can recover from the high fatigue day. So we coordinated with his MMA coaches to make sure that we weren't beating him up every single day. He has a hard day and what we might call a light day, which is more bodybuilding, upper body work, and more skill work like jujitsu or some pads, hitting mitts rather than going live. So I think that's, other than that, just trying to keep him fed, appropriately, so he gains mostly muscle and less fat. So, my philosophy behind that is to obviously get a gram of protein per pound of body weight, and then keep the fats kind of lower, around 0.3 or 0.4 grams per pound of body weight, so I can drive the carbs higher to fuel the work and utilize that to kind of better for recovery, better for anaerobic performance. And so that's kind of our macro breakdown, and what he eats, for those foods should be micronutrient dense. So it's a broad range of, protein sources. I love red meat for the iron, B12 and zinc, and I love whole eggs, and I love yogurt as great protein sources. They give a ton of benefits. And then, then I'm chasing potassium, fruit, potatoes twice as much potassium as banana. And we obviously have to give him a reasonable amount of salt for all the sweating that he does. So I think that's the nuts and bolts of what we're trying to do down there.
Question. Did you notice a significant change in terms of his performance as soon as he started adding more muscle, or was it like just same thing, like he was still performing at a high capacity while he was adding the muscle?
Oh, great question. We take metrics of his performance, things like a broad jump and a high jump. We want to keep speed and power when we increase strength. Nobody wants to get an athlete stronger and get them slower at the same time. And that was the neat thing about the overspeed treadmill, is it allowed us to get metrics to measure how fast he is. And we used the broad jump as another measurement of how explosive he was. And we just told Jon, we don't know how heavy you can get. You've never tried this before. He's always been a wrestler cutting weight. But we know his older brother is a 300-pound defensive lineman who was a Super Bowl champion. And we know his younger brother is a 270-pound NFL football champion that just set the all-time sack record for Arizona. So it's not like we were concerned that he didn't have the genetic potential.
Yeah.
We just, like you asked, we just wanted to make sure that he didn't decrease in performance that was necessary in sport specific. So we had a few measurements, and every now and then we'll sprint him on the treadmill, make him do a broad jump. And that kind of tells us, is he getting, slower, or can we keep going? Can we keep adding more and more muscle? And as of now, he's actually excelled in performance. One of the main reasons is because, notice John's always been really strong on things like deadlifts. He's obviously built for it. But his posterior chain wasn't trained quite as hard. You see that a lot with wrestlers, a lot of athletes, as a matter of fact. Their hamstrings and glutes don't get trained as much with resistance training. And so we focused on that right out of the gate. And that was one of the big reasons why he started seeing, when he went live with other athletes, that he was getting in under double leg takedowns so much deeper than previously against the same athletes. They had no opportunity to sprawl. And he's really...
That was something I was going to ask you, is what does his training partners feel as he's rolling with them and he's sparring with them, as far as how much deeper he can get into that? I've watched other MMA fighters train a lot and get a lot stronger, and then all of a sudden they go to roll, and their rolling is just like that much better.
Agreed. And, historically, when he was really going hard with his training partners, he was also dieting to get down to 205. So now it's like not only
it's not only fair.
Stronger, but he's getting bigger, and able to eat. And so when he comes to the workouts with more energy, his stamina and endurance has always been extraordinary. He's the 5-round guy, that's for sure. He can go at the same pace for 5 straight rounds. Everybody that's ever fought him kind of starts dropping off in the 4th or 5th, and he just doesn't slow down. It's incredible. And we wanted to maintain that endurance. Obviously, the more muscle you add, the more oxygen demand and the more potential for your endurance to suffer. So, but we do that with tempo runs on this overspeed treadmill. Again, decreases fatigue, but it allows you to test, how many sets and reps can you do at what rest period over what course of time. And if we can maintain or improve that, then we know his cardiovascular fitness is also getting better.
I mean, you're touching on a very important point in terms of the muscle and the amount of oxygen you need, because one of the things that Wilder lost that fight to Tyson Fury was because, he added a lot of weight and he didn't work on his endurance to say that he couldn't last the rounds. And you saw it in the fight, after a few good rounds, he was dead. He couldn't keep up.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that sometimes people train the wrong kind of endurance. Not all camps have professional coaches that are aware that, what zone you're training in can have a big impact on whether or not you're improving your cardiovascular fitness without compromising your strength.
Your speed and power.
Your speed and power.
Yeah.
And that often happens. You have to be kind of careful about, again, you've got a lot of different demands and you want to optimize all of them. And if one is causing another one to decrease, then you got to be careful about that.
Yeah.
Very true.
And then obviously fueling workouts like this with this type of an athlete. One of the things that I heard you talk about, which was really interesting, was your time with Flex Wheeler, how he was basically kind of training your metabolism. He got you kind of set up with your meal plan and said, okay, call me when you're hungry. And he was basically kind of ramping up, talk to us about that. That's a really interesting, a lot of people just don't understand how the digestive tract will adapt if you narrow down those foods and let it become very efficient at digesting a few things. So I'd love to hear you speak on that.
Yeah, it's not a scientific term per se. It was just a video that I did, and we call it metabolic adaptation in the science, in the study of nutrition, the study of metabolism. When you eat fewer calories, particularly when you lose weight, your metabolic rate will slow down. You'll burn fewer calories. When you eat more calories, your metabolic rate will speed up. You might burn a few more calories. And that's not an endless scenario. And some people's metabolic rate will slow more than others, and some people's will speed up more than others on either end of that spectrum, whether you're dieting or trying to gain weight. And over time, and if you try and eat too much, if you wake up one morning and decide you're going to eat Ronnie Coleman's diet, you're in big trouble. If you're eating,
that is not going to work.
No, 2,500, maybe 3,000 calories a day, and you find out Ronnie ate 6, and so the next day you wake up and you start trying to eat 6, or you watch a Hafthor Bjornsson or a Brian.
Oh,
There's no way. It's like if you bench 300 pounds, you can't go in the gym tomorrow and put 400 on the bar and ask for a lift off. The body
has to. It's just not going to last very long.
It's just not going to go your way.
Get it off.
And again, it goes back to people get to be impatient. They think they're going to put on this massive amount of muscle in a short period of time just because they've put so many calories in their body and they're lifting weights. Adding muscle takes a long time. It's a slow process. I don't care, how much you throw at it. It takes an extraordinary amount of time, months and years to start to slowly build muscle tissue, and you have to be really consistent with that calorie surplus. And so what you find is that it's probably better off just to eat a 500 calorie surplus. Initially, you'll be full, which was the case with me, and within 10 days or 2 weeks, it'll become a little easier, and then you can add a couple hundred more calories. Flex would just add 1 ounce of meat, add another half a cup of rice, add one more meal. This was a progression over the course of many weeks. And this was before I actually went down and started training with him pre-contest for the show, the 3 months out. This was 6 or 7 months out. He goes, I need you to get up to 5,000 calories before you come see me, because if we aren't there and then we start to diet you, there's where else do we go? Now you're depleting yourself. I can't fuel the workouts with 2,700 calories a day. It's not going to happen. And I need you to train 2 times a day to be able to utilize, that much food and digest it. And it takes a little adaptation time. It's a long process. So he kind of set me up for that ahead of time.
And the digestion, that seems to be such a big part of it, because obviously if you're not digesting the food you're eating, you're never going to be able to ramp this up in the way that you did. I think one of the big things that people miss is they're just looking at the numbers of what they're eating. They're not looking at how their body processes it. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, this is something that I learned a long time ago, because I had a lot of digestive problems, and certain foods that I would eat would give me a lot of gas and bloating, and I just wouldn't be able to eat enough food to maintain my weight. I was a hard gainer. And then, of course, as I started working with strong men and large professional athletes, I would use some of the same tips and tricks that I was able to allowed me to eat more calories for them. And really the bottom line of that is that you need to eat, because we have to eat so many calories, we have to be cautious about the foods that we eat taking longer or harder to digest, or causing significant amount of gas and bloating, or just giving us a satiety signal for too long, so we can't eat the next meal soon enough. Because in order to consume 10,000 calories, you got to break that. You can't just eat 3,000 in one meal. You could, but you're going to have a lot of problems digesting.
I don't know. I've seen like 3 other guys that I spent a lot of months with do that, and still just bewildered on how they could manage to get that many calories in all of the time.
Well, I asked the question.
I just don't digest it as fast as they do.
No. And, to be honest, and I've worked with a lot of those guys, and as you know, and they, what they don't tell you, or what they do tell me as their coach, is that they have a lot of problems. It's a very difficult task to eat that many calories, and they have a lot of digestive issues. They get diarrhea a lot. They're on the toilet all the time. It's a painful existence. Yep. And so I use foods that are easier to digest. I kind of select those now from the low FODMAP menu, because Monash University out of Australia has put together a list of foods that are more or less likely to cause you gas and bloating. And they tend to be a little lower fiber. They tend to be less filling foods. And so I pick those foods. And even little tricks like eating steak, it's easier to eat ground beef than steak. And that's why I would have athletes grind their steak into ground beef. It has more surface area. It's easier to eat. It's just mechanically speaking, you can consume more of it faster and it digests a little quicker. So you'd be hungry again sooner. Same thing about, I blended up that monster mash where I mixed the ground beef with a couple of scrambled eggs, with some white rice, with some bone broth. And it was really just to facilitate make it easier for the athlete to eat more calories in one sitting, for it to digest faster and to be hungry again sooner. Because if you eat all of those things separately and they're a little drier, it might just as a matter of, just the mouth being able to chew and not having enough saliva or
to swallow.
Yeah,
it can be hard.
It's one step away from drinking some of your meals, and we know some great athletes who have done that. Derek Poundstone,
the chicken shake, the chicken shake, baby.
Yeah. Just not going to that one.
I like whole foods. I prefer obviously the foods that are really micronutrient dense, beef and eggs and yogurt in particular. And then I do try and get a potassium foundation. I'll use orange juice instead of oranges because oranges have a high satiety, whereas orange juice don't. I'll sprinkle a little dextrose on the rice because it stimulates amylase and in both the mouth and in the pancreas, so you can more of that starch can be digested. It's just easier to consume. Everybody knows sushi rice. It's sugar rice. You can eat a ton of it and you're hungry an hour later.
Yeah.
So you use some of those same tricks. And that was kind of the big thing that Hofthor and Shaw, initially when they were working with me said is, they were hungry and they hadn't been hungry in years. They were able to eat more food more often and have less gas and bloating and have a better quality stool. Because in order to eat massive amounts of calories for a lot of these guys, they had to consume more fats. And fats can be really hard to break down. The gallbladder, after a while, just isn't able to, pump out enough to break down the fats, enough bile. And then you end up with a lot of those fats getting into the large intestine, and it's just, you kind of start leaking, if there's no better word.
On that level, brother, I'll tell you, when I have when I cycle my fats up a little higher, obviously, and especially if I'm not digesting well, if I cycle up a little too quickly, put some strain, I can tell very, very quickly, because when I'm done with the bathroom, the toilet needs a scrub brush. There's a big difference. There's a big difference between digesting well and, even if I'm digesting well and I make too big of a change in my fat cycle protocol, next thing you know, it's a couple of minutes with a scrub brush. The cleaning lady, chews at, gets all pissed off at me.
Yeah, I did a video talking about that with sugar alcohols and sharding your pants was my video. I talked about it's the kind of passage that needs a shower afterwards. There's no way you're going to handle that with toilet paper. But Mark Bell has always said, "May your tits always be tapered," and that's a measure for me. Of course, if you make any extreme adjustments in, say, your macro percentages of fats in particular, or even fiber in one direction or the other, initially you're going to have a phase where you're going to have some adjustment because of the water balance and the bulk balance in the large intestine. The thing I like about a lot of these animal foods we call low residue foods that are on the FODMAP menu is they're almost entirely digested and absorbed in the small intestine. A lot of the foods that get to the large intestine, which you do need some for your microbiota that need prebiotics, et cetera, to keep a healthy colon. But a lot of those are indigestible and they get broken down, by bacteria and create a lot of methane. And then you're just walking around gas all the time, and you might have a poor stool quality, and it's just uncomfortable. It's nobody wants to get under a big squat and get to the bottom of the squat, and and leak.
Well, on that level, all of us have been squatting and deadlifting, and we got some rather deep cheeks, as I call it. So when you do have a little leakage or a shart, you save your underwear, which is always very important, because there's nothing worse than after a workout, changing your clothes and have your wife look at your underpants and go, "What the fuck have you been doing? Jesus Christ."
If our wives got together, that would be the first story they would tell. I can remember mine with a broom handle, and way out on the end of the broom handle was the underwear I had just squatted in, and she's carrying it to the laundry room and won't get within a broom handle's distance of it.
That's like
my wife makes me carry my own.
They took they took the baby's diaper and dipped it in and out of a toilet being flushed to get all the chunks out before they washed it,
Yeah. So all these experiences over the years that we've had, both, from our education and our competing and our coaching and our collaborations with other great coaches and athletes, kind of led me to start just writing all this stuff down, all the lessons that we learned and the things that we're discussing. And so I started creating this document that I made, which everybody's familiar with now, the Vertical Diet, the ebook and really what it allowed me to do is just put it all together. And then when an athlete comes to me, I just send them this document, which I made into an ebook now that I've been promoting for years.
Which you sent to me. Thank you.
Yeah. And it
made a big difference in my life.
Every question that I've had, every experience that I've had in which I've had to, try and answer or resolve for myself. And I covered sleep and, of course, the diet and digestion and IBS and things like acid reflux and blood testing and hormones and blood pressure and blood sugar, obviously cardio and lifting, but also recovery from that and injury rehab and, compliance with all of this, of course. And I just put it all together so that I wasn't answering the same questions over and over again and published it. And that people always ask me, what did you do for these great athletes? And I tell 99% of them, I send them that same document. I mean, it's all in there. Feel free to ask me questions, but I'll be repeating myself because I've spent years compiling this. And then I would start attaching links to videos and articles and peer-reviewed research to any of the suggestions that I made. So for those people who wanted to take a deeper dive or just have the confidence that it was, largely successful. Of course, there's always outliers, but I tried to find the things that worked for most people. And that's, it's kind of been a big goal of mine now as I've aged, is that a lot of the stuff in that book lends itself well to, I hate to use the word longevity, but I think as competitors, we know, I did a video, what was the name of that video? If you want to be healthy, don't compete. And it wasn't just about powerlifters and bodybuilders. It relates to, I was talking about 14-year-old gymnasts in the Olympics getting surgeries for torn tendons and, rotator cuffs and Achilles tendons and stuff. I've talked about 10-year-old badminton players in China blowing out their lateral collateral ligaments. Anything you do at a competitive level that's repetitive, the fitness level required to accomplish that. I said in the video, there's a difference between health and fitness. Fitness being the ability to perform a particular duty or task. The fitness level required to compete in the world's strongest man is not healthy by no sense of the imagination, or bodybuilding or powerlifting or football or gymnastics or any other sport, especially the high impact sports. Soccer has a much higher injury rate than weightlifting, by far, by tenfold, as would football and any other impact sport. So, I will say this, with your diet and that stuff, it makes it a whole lot healthier. I'm going to tell you that right now. It was kind of
I smoke my blood tests.
I said part of my job, or part of what I had to learn throughout my career to be able to compete into my 40s and look at Nick in his 50s now, still crushing it. I had to mitigate damage. It's not like you can avoid it, because if you don't take yourself, somewhere, near that area, that zone, I've always said that, show me someone who's never been injured, I'll show you someone who's never won anything. And that's, there's a whole lot of guys out there talking about their knee health that squat 200 pounds. It's like, but
it's so true, brother. Oh my God.
It's true. So I said a
simple statement, but so correct.
Agreed. So a lot of what I do when I get in touch with a big athlete, I think Nick and I first started talking about, this kind of thing with respect to injuries and inflammation and hips and knees and stuff some 10 plus years ago.
Yep.
A lot of the stuff I do is really to try and mitigate damage, to allow them to continue to compete at a high level, but pay attention to things, like joint health, like physical health, heart health. And that's why, we talk about the blood tests and the like.
Yep.
I hate to work our way into this, tragic recent death of Sean Roden and other great athletes, John Meadows recently, and Andy Hammond, people we all know and love and have associated with over the years. But there's a lot of people out there that aren't well known, who have suffered from, I think, kind of pushing themselves too hard and not kind of taking care of their health. And that's, I can't say, and I did a video where I talked about, get a blood test, that a lot of this is preventable. It really is. And we put ourselves in a very compromised position, and we do it intentionally so to reach, the competitive level that we want. But that doesn't mean that we can't do it and minimize and reduce our risk and mitigate some of the damage. And one of the biggest things that I've been screaming about for over 5 or 6 years now, I've been getting blood tests. I've had over 200 blood tests. I've had over 100 in the last 10 years. I've been getting them very regularly, almost on a monthly basis throughout my career, so I could see what was going on and make adjustments accordingly. I just recently, I don't know if you step on anybody's toes, but I just recently came across a group called MerrickHealth.com. And their blood tests, you can do them online. They're like half the price of what I've been paying. And
that's a great resource, brother. That's a great resource. People need that resource. Please share that.
You can go to stanefferding.com and scroll down to blood tests. And I don't make any money on this. And scroll down to blood tests, and it'll give you a link, and it'll show you the blood tests that I typically buy, but it's a really comprehensive test. But I just went on there this morning and I typed this up. It's merrickhealth.com. And if anybody wants to DM me, I will send them a copy of this. I kept it in my notepad, and I'll just copy and paste it to their DM and send it to them. But I get a blood test I've been paying way over twice this. And this is kind of the stuff I like to see of my athletes. This is what I had Hofthor do, Brian Shaw do, Larry Wheels do, Dan Green, even at the highest level, even John Jones did this, and Lane Johnson from the Eagles. All of my athletes send me blood tests as soon as I start working with them. And we've been able to reduce their blood pressure, reverse fatty liver, reduce their blood sugars across the board. Lane Johnson of the Eagles was weighing 312 and was having a hell of a time maintaining his weight. And he had a registered dietitian, and this is not an indictment on a registered dietitian. The co-author of my book is an RDN PhD who is head of the dietetic department at UNLV, Dr. Damon McCune. But oftentimes when, these folks, they read all this stuff in a book and they understand it very well, but in application for a 300 plus pound athlete, they've never done it. And when you prescribe somebody chicken breast and quinoa who needs to consume 6,000+ calories a day, you're not doing them any service. It's impossible. They won't be able to maintain their weight. So anyhow, we took Lane from 312 pounds to 333 pounds, and his blood pressure went from systolic in the 150s down to 123 at gaining 20 pounds. because we paid attention to all these other factors. The major one being, and the reason I'm focusing on blood pressure, because there's two primary reasons that are two big killers, is going to be blood pressure and blood thickness, and kind of right behind it, what causes most of it is insulin resistance, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and metabolic syndrome. But blood pressure and thick blood are two major contributors that are manageable. And this test here, for instance, I'm just going to read these off real quick, just because some people will be familiar with this, but if you're not, I don't want to distract you. But this test costs $100. That is it, $100. And they measure your inflammation marker with C-reactive protein, your metabolic panel, free and total testosterone, your PSA for your prostate-specific antigen, a urinalysis, a CBC with differential, your HbA1c with sugars, your iron, your lipid panel for your triglycerides and LDL and HDL, your thyroid function, your fasted insulin, which is a leading indicator of insulin resistance that I like to use, your ferritin, which is an inflammation marker, but also an iron storage marker, your estrogen, all of that for $100. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's so cheap. Oh my God, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I was paying $250 for this same test just because I had already skinnied down. My normal test is around $400 because it's really comprehensive, but a lot of stuff's in there is pretty unnecessary. It's just stuff I like to see. I might do it with athletes, but if I call this the budget blood work panel now, I just looked this up today and I compared everything on my blood test to what these guys' prices are. And these are everyday prices. This isn't some discount. And so I reached out to these guys just within the last couple of weeks there, because Mark Bell knows these folks. And I asked them if I could get a discount for my clients. They said they'll give me 10% off if I recommend this. So I'm recommending it. It's on my website. I don't make any money. You get a 10% discount, but DM me and I will send you this link and this list. You can go make your own blood test, and for $100, you don't have to have a doctor. You just go down to a LabCorp near you. There's one within a mile of damn near everybody in the country.
Yeah, that was what I was about to ask you. Where do you get the count at?
They email you a form that you print out and take to the lab. They draw your blood test. It's already paid for. These guys, they take your $100, and then in like 3 to 5 days, they email you the results. And the results say very specifically what the ranges are. Some of them even have explanations as to, what the indicators are. It's pretty easy. You're looking for, a couple of big things. Obviously, you want to get your blood pressure checked and your blood thickness. I did a whole video on when to donate blood, talking about the difference between thick blood, polycythemia vera, and just high red blood cells, which is erythrocytosis, which is quite common even in elevation or people using performance-enhancing drugs. Doesn't necessarily mean thick blood. I'm cautious over donating. And again, there's a whole YouTube video I did on this, because then your platelets and your ferritin, your iron starts to tank. And now you're gassing out, your heart rate's elevated 15 beats a minute, and your performance will suffer if you overdonate. And it may be unnecessary, but between thick blood and blood pressure and then blood sugars, those are the three biggies. We could save a lot of lives. One of the biggest things I did initially with all these big athletes was check and see if they wore a CPAP. I won't say his name, but I mentioned some of the guys who have recently passed away, who I know personally, all of them. And one of their close friends told me that he would never wear a CPAP. And I was shocked. Hofthor did not wear a CPAP when I met him. I went up and stayed at his place. He snores like a freight train. I'm like, you got to get a CPAP. Brian Shaw wasn't wearing his. Dan Green wasn't wearing his. Lane Johnson wasn't wearing his. They don't like them. They don't appreciate that when you hold your breath, when you snore and wake up tired, you're holding your breath, your blood thickens, your blood pressure dramatically increases overnight, and you have a significantly higher risk of cardiovascular disease as a result. And so I know oftentimes doctors will tell you that blood pressure is what they call idiopathic, meaning there's no cause, no known cause. But that's bullshit. We know what the cause is, but it's multifactorial. It's not one thing that can be fixed with one prescription. It's multifactorial. And I have a high blood pressure quick fix kit in my ebook. I have 100% success rate, as should anyone who applies these really simple and well-known methods, reducing blood pressure with my clients, those people who work with me. I'll just give you a quick list. It's in my ebook. I even got a video, high blood pressure quick fix kit. You can go watch it for free. You can buy my book. Losing weight obviously is a huge one. Taking a 10-minute walk after meals is more effective than metformin for reversing or preventing type 2 diabetes. Metformin is the #1 prescribed drug in the world for type 2 diabetes. It's twice as effective just taking a 10-minute walk after meals because it reduces what they call postprandial glycemia, the elevation of blood sugars and the duration of elevation after eating a meal by up to 30%. That's significant. And that'll help obviously keep insulin down. And those are the drivers of most of these metabolic diseases, such as fatty liver and blood pressure, et cetera. And the high blood pressure, just as a comment, as an aside, is also the leading cause of kidney damage, which should be of huge concern. We all have friends that are on dialysis. We know them who have suffered in this industry in particular from high blood pressure. I liken it to running a pressure washer through a coffee filter. That's what you're
that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense when you break it down like that. You know, Stan, that's the way that you kind of present things is really helpful for people to get a perspective that will make them pay attention to this stuff, you know. And one of the things I love that you said a minute ago, you know, solving these problems is never one thing. It's a series of things that go into the solution.
100%. You know? And none of my athletes have declined in performance, but they've improved in their health markers. So I'm not telling people to quit lifting or to quit pursuing their goals. Quite the contrary. I'm just the opposite. I was willing to sacrifice anything to get to my goals. But I found that I actually performed better when I paid attention to these markers because I was testing them frequently. But I'll just keep going. The 10-minute walk. Obviously, resistance training is huge. The muscle is a sink for glucose. Sugars will be absorbed from the bloodstream into the muscles without the need of insulin. So, which is a huge impact on blood pressure. CPAP, it's a monster. If you snore and wake up tired, it's not just a problem for your wife; it's a problem for your health. And I've even gone so far. As to tell people to go on Craigslist and buy a used CPAP. I have instructions in my ebook on how to just go to a local. You can get them for a few $100s, and this problem could be solved tomorrow. It's like a 99% cure to get a CPAP. And I even make a recommendation as to the type. Any auto PAP, there's a couple of companies. They automatically adjust to give you the pressure you need. They read what your breathing is like. And they also, unlike the ones I wore back in the early 90s, I've been using the CPAP for 30 years. Ever since I got north of 240 pounds, it became more and more necessary to use a CPAP. Anybody with a thick neck, it's a crowded airway. It's even Jordan Fagenbaum from Barbell Medicine weighs 198 pounds. He wears a CPAP. He's got a thick neck. He's a squatter. And so it's not always about being obese or overweight. It's just any of us with the necks that we have, we're going to crowding. So get a CPAP. It's an immediate fix. 3 things that can almost change your blood pressure overnight is dramatically increasing your potassium intake from food in particular. And I have a list, even on my high blood pressure thing, I list the foods. A potato, why I always have potatoes in my diet, it's twice as much potassium as a banana. And then fruit, yogurt, and even meat has 100 milligrams of potassium for every ounce. And so you could easily get, 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day. Calcium is another one, which is why I love yogurt. It has a great effect on reducing blood pressure. And magnesium, which typically you got to supplement magnesium because it's hard to get from food. Thyroid function has a big effect on it. It can be very dramatic. And so getting adequate iodine in your diet and not overtraining and undersleeping, which is going to happen with the CPAP. Those are the big ones.
So basically organic cranberry juice.
Yes, that's the one I love. Those are the big ones. I think, and then the high blood sugar quick fix kit is also in my ebook, which that's huge. Your insulin levels, obviously, but some of the things we do there is just eating protein first has a pretty significant effect on regulating your insulin, your blood sugars, and not only in that meal but in subsequent meals is a big one for blood sugars. The 10-minute walks, of course, are huge. Working out's huge. Losing weight's huge. Sleeping is huge. Your blood sugars go up after even one short night of sleep. So there's a lot of fantastic information. I think that people. I don't want to overcomplicate it. I just want you to go to my website or DM me and get a blood test. It's $100 for Christ's sake. And if you see and get your blood pressure tested, you could do that at Walgreens or CVS. They've got clinics at most of those places that'll do it for I think free. And if you see those problems, man, reach out to me. I've answered over 100,000 DMs in the last 3 or 4 years. Comments, questions, and I usually copy and paste answers. But it's so important, I think, that people understand this could be a wonderful pursuit, the sports that we're competing in. And I don't think that people should be afraid to train, to add muscle, to get big, to compete, so long as they do it in a healthy manner and don't get too overweight or too high blood pressure or too thick of blood. I think that this is fixable. So sorry to blather on, but it's just so tragic and so recent that I think it needs to be said.
Well, brother, to your credit, you make the stuff that seems the stuff that really is complicated. You make it pretty easy for the layman to understand, and I include myself in that. So I'm not talking smack about anybody. Sometimes hearing somebody get really in depth on talking about things like you're talking about with blood tests and things like this can be a little overwhelming. So the fact that you break it down and make it simple for people to understand is a huge, huge help for people to kind of not veer away from something. A lot of times people get a little, they'll veer away from something because it seems too complex. So I think you're doing a phenomenal job breaking it down for people to see a little more clearly.
Or somebody tells them that they have to lose weight, or even that they have to stop eating meat and eggs, which is bullshit. Here's a meta-analysis.
Dude, I'm telling you, meat and eggs is something I eat. I've eaten that shit for 20 fucking years.
Helps with performance. 100% helps with performance. We see study after study now where even when they compare equivalent amounts of protein intake and equated for calories between people who eat whole eggs and people who eat just egg whites on groups of people who train both for strength and hypertrophy, the whole egg eating group outperformed the egg white group. The diversity of those micronutrients is important. Cholesterol is actually important. And I know that people like to squawk about that, but there's
brain function too.
Yeah. And
brain function.
100%. Yeah. The creatine and everything in the meat. But here's a recent study. This is examine.com. Anybody, all of our viewers out there should be familiar with, and if not, you should definitely go on to examine.com. They're one of the foremost researchers in the industry on supplements to begin with. And it's a group of about 30 researchers run by, I think, Kamal Patel and a bunch of PhD researchers. These guys are brilliant. They don't take any outside funding. They just did a recent meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. This isn't epidemiology. These are randomized controlled trials of red meat consumption. And this was looking at dozens of different studies. And the conclusion of this, I'll just run right to the conclusion. Total red meat consumption does not affect changes in biomarkers of glycemic control or inflammation. And a second study, this one also a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. They tested cardiovascular disease risk factors for people consuming red meat. They looked at total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL, triglycerides, systolic and diastolic blood pressure. And their conclusion right here, study, the results from this systematically searched meta-analysis of RCT supports the idea that consumption of red meat does not influence blood lipids and lipoproteins or blood pressure. So you always go to doctors that will tell you, you got to stop eating red meats if you've got high LDLs. you may have to reduce your saturated fat, bacon, butter, maybe whole cheese. But red meat, like a top sirloin, is about 9% saturated fat as measured by total calories, which is below the American Heart Association's recommendation for saturated fats. So I don't take it out. I don't recommend people taking it out. If you have thick blood, or if you have high hemoglobin, hematocrit, and RBCs, you want to look at ferritin, which is your iron, and you want and get an iron panel, and you want to look at your platelets to make sure that your blood isn't too thick. But even like Chris Masterjohn, PhD, who has a nutritionist who has hemochromatosis, which is a genetic predisposition for high iron, he still eats red meat. He just donates because he thinks that excluding red meat would exclude so many valuable micronutrients that are important for his health that it would be preferable to donate periodically when it was justifiable. I'm concerned about people over restriction. I talk about this a lot with female dieters. People are eating egg whites and tilapia and broccoli, and they end up with metabolic they end up with kind of a triad. They end up with cessation of the menstrual period, which is amenorrhea. They end up with low iron. They end up with low calcium, low thyroid.
Hey, Stan, just to clarify for everybody, you say red meat, you're not talking just about beef. You're talking about lamb. You're talking about it's not just, we're not just talking about beef. We're talking bison. We're talking lamb.
Yeah.
We're talking all sorts of, it's not just beef that we're talking about.
It's what we call ruminant animals with a 4-chambered stomach that converts cellulose, which is the grass that they eat, into very nutritious, like I mentioned, 3 times higher in iron, 6 times higher in zinc, 9 times higher in B vitamins than, say, chicken or turkey, and also a better omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, which we don't know how important that is necessarily, but they're just more efficient at digesting that food, which makes it easy, which gives you more micronutrients, but also makes it easier for you to digest. And I'm not saying that exclusively red meat. I'm just saying there's absolutely no reason to eliminate it from the diet. And
yes,
for women who are dieting, it can come at a cost. Same with whole eggs. The idea that you would take an egg yolk out and throw peanut butter in, it's just idiotic. The micronutrients in an egg yolk, the biotin for skin, hair, and nails, the choline, which is for liver health, all the things. An egg yolk is like nature's multivitamin. There's just no reason to take it out. If you want to control your fats, use a half whole eggs and half egg whites. I worked with Nadia Wyatt, who took 3rd place in the Miss Olympia and 2nd in the Arnold Classic. And she's 123 pounds on stage. She ate red meat, whole eggs, yogurt, oranges, potatoes, all the way up to the day of the show. I have a picture of every meal she ate for 3 months straight. And she felt amazing. She looked amazing. She stayed strong. Her training was awesome. Her energy levels were great. She didn't have any of the dry skin or the hypothyroid problems or any of those issues. Because she kept in the micronutrients that are necessary. So, and red meat can be just as lean as chicken. You can go down to a grass-fed sirloin tip or top round. And, I like to lower fats as I diet athletes down. And I'll do that by just using leaner meats and without having to sacrifice the micronutrient benefits of red meat. So it's a broad menu, and I try and keep in, since you're already dieting, I try and keep in the foods that are least restrictive in micronutrients.
Yeah, it seems like the industry kind of just is, so much information is just kind of fed down the line with, chicken and egg whites and all of these foods that are really kind of bland with the micronutrient values. And there's nothing there for the body to hold on to.
And look, I have found studies, and there are studies I just mentioned that show both an increase in saturated fats or a reasonable amount. You don't want to go under 25% fats. They start affecting your hormones, et cetera. And I just mentioned about the whole eggs. But Nick and I know simply from experience. I love these people who read books all their lives, but never actually went out and needed me. Nick and I both know, all of us know, when you pull red meat and whole eggs and dairy out of your diet, you get weaker, period.
Yeah.
And so people say, well, you're not equating for calories. No, it's not a calorie thing. You might be able to, you might be able to have fewer losses if you're not in a deficit, sure, but it has an immediate impact on my strength. And I see it all the time when people make those changes in their diet.
Absolutely,
I like to try to explain to people, your protein source, okay, it's a protein, but that compared to a car, the micronutrient value is going to explain how powerful the motor of that car is. Not all proteins are created the same,
I agree.
And people just don't see that. They just see a gram of protein as a gram of protein. When that's like saying that's like putting a Volkswagen Bug next to a goddamn Bugatti and think, oh yeah, they're both sports cars.
Yeah.
And
I don't want to be. And again, I've tried very hard not to bro science my way through this stage of my life where I'm trying to provide education to those people who want to reach and achieve the kinds of things that I was able to do in my life. And so I did recruit the hell. I started attending all the seminars from all of the academics in the industry. And I just got back from Miami yesterday at a seminar. I've been to the barbell medicine seminar, and I follow and I subscribe to some of the smartest people in the industry with the PhDs in nutrition. I partnered with a PhD, RDN, and we've got over 500 references to peer-reviewed published research in our book. But at the end of the day, I have to bridge the gap between, information and application, and results matter. And, I don't care, and I like to show studies, but I don't care how many studies you show me. If somebody's not performing or improving in performance, something's got to change. And I think we've got a pretty damn good recipe, and no much trial and error and education and collaboration and from coaches and other athletes. And a lot of times when the academics, and there's some good ones out there that also compete, the Greg Knuckles of the world, who was natural world record in powerlifting at one time, who's also got a master's degree, and Lane Norton, a natural world record powerlifter and bodybuilder who's got a PhD in nutrition. Even the guys from barbell medicine who are super sharp, and they're MDs, and they've also got, pretty damn impressive lifts, over 700-pound deadlifts. There's a lot of really sharp guys out there that also compete, who I'll listen to much more readily than I would somebody who hasn't, been through it like we have and learned and put the work in.
I think that's something people could learn from. I think that's something people can learn from in general, is you have the people that are that smart, but may not have done the application. Like, for instance, an ER doctor as opposed to a guy in a lab. You're going to listen to the one that's been helping people and actually curing people over the one that, yeah, he's read the book, but he hasn't really dealt with the people. It's the same type of thing. Absolutely. 100%.
I can't tell you how many times over the years I've had an athlete call me and like, Stan, I've gotten weaker. And I could just name off like 5 things right off the top. Are you taking an anti-estrogen? Are you on metformin? Did you cut out red meat and whole eggs? Are you taking antacids, for acid reflux? Are you taking anti-inflammatories? I almost immediately, with those 5, I probably covered 90% of the problems that have come to me, and they're like, oh yeah, I've been doing that.
It's like, yeah, I was doing that too.
Yeah. It's pretty easy. You see it enough times, you're like, oh, yep, this is what you got to do.
Well, there's no substitute for experience, brother. And how old are you? I know you and Nick are almost the same age. How old are you now?
54, both of us now, aren't we?
You got a year on me.
Oh my goodness! Well, I just turned 54 2 days ago or so, so I'm
well,
still
have a
young
birthday, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, mine was the 3rd, so I turned 53 on the 3rd. So
yeah,
we both, our birthdays are real close together.
Well, I think
I'm going to join the
this.
50 club here in about 2 months. So I'll be in the 50 club with you guys here in January. So
Yeah.
I'm not too far behind.
I look forward to doing another episode with you guys when we're 60 and when we're 70. I'm just
let's do it.
Lifting weights is the fountain of youth. We know from research that sarcopenia and muscle loss and strength loss is one of the primary predictors. That and VO2 max is actually one of the primary predictors, but the VO2 max is dependent upon having adequate muscle tissue to create the demand for your lungs to provide oxygen. So it kind of go hand in hand, but we know that grip strength can give us a good predictor of longevity, and trip and falls and how you recover from those things. And so, we're all out there now saying the same thing, including the academics and the medical professionals, that they're prescribing weightlifting to damn near everyone who can even move.
Yeah.
Even in preference to traditional cardiovascular fitness, because weightlifting does provide a cardiovascular benefit. If you lift anything to within a couple reps of failure, your heart rate's going to go up and you're going to be breathing. And
that's it. Speaking of which, the reps set to 20. That's basically hit under load right there. I hear you reference that all the time.
Yeah, and I'm somewhat cautious. One of the people I follow in the industry is Dr. Peter Attia, and he's a Stanford MD, was a Johns Hopkins, he wrote their surgery manual. He's a genius. He's a brilliant Mensa level guy, and he's just fun to listen to because he's in longevity now. And he used to be an ultra marathoner, and he was a distance swimmer. And I think he even did some triathlons. He came to the realization as he got into his 40s that from looking at the research, and that even that kind of cardiovascular challenging, like marathoners who compete relatively frequently, is not good for your health. It creates in a large, thin heart wall. It actually does some damage to the endothelial lining of the blood vessels. And those guys start to see calcification, which you would never suspect of someone who is a runner. But again, at the extremes, ultra marathoners with lots and lots of mileage and training at a very high level and very hard. So, I wouldn't say that I'm kind of getting around to the fact that 20s are pretty challenging. I wouldn't do them all too often, because you got to be cautious how often you do things that take your heart rate up that high under that much load, whether it's, jogging 40 or 50 miles or squatting 50 reps. I don't think that's a longevity pursuit. I wouldn't recommend that. Occasionally, I still love to do shit that I love to do. So
I'm right there with you.
Health.
Yeah, there's a difference between doing a set of 20 now, being close to 50, or for you guys slightly over 50, than there was when we were 25. It's a whole different feeling in there. It's like your heart is pounding and it just feels a little different.
It feels different. It's interesting though, because I'll usually do it at the end of my workout to finish it off, and I'm done. And then no matter what time of the year it is, I'll go get in my pool to cool my core body temperature down, and I feel better way faster.
Yeah.
Way faster. Instead of it taking an hour and a half to where I feel back normal, where I can think again, I'll be able to think in about 15 minutes if I do that.
I agree. Another article that, just thinking about that, your recovery, and we talk a lot about recovering from training. Kamal Patel's group, examine.com, just posted a bunch more research on sitting. And I've talked about this in my rant. I think 10 reasons 10-minute walks will change your life is on YouTube. And we talk about the fact that moving frequently throughout the day is more effective than one bout of exercise at the end of the day. They studied office workers who would get up and take 3 10-minute walks, or maybe once every hour they'd get up for a few minutes and move around. And they had a lower all-cause mortality than those people who sat around all day and then just went and did 30 minutes of cardio at the end of the day. That didn't seem to offset the length of time that they sat around. I tell my athletes when they fly the same thing. Don't sit in that seat for 5 straight hours.
I was actually going to point that out. Like usually when I'm doing a show, it is, you know, whether it's the Olympiad or Arnold, whatever the case may be, and I'm flying to these shows, I always get up and move around whenever I'm flying.
100%. Sit on the aisle. I'll set my watch and have it. My alarm will go off every hour on the hour. And I'm like, I'm up. I'm walking back. I know when I flew over to Moscow, I can't tell you how many times I walked back to the little to the bathroom area in the back and stood there and marched, high knees and marched. And I looked like an idiot.
And the people on the plane must be going, what is wrong? Because everybody else is just trying to find a way to snuggle in their seat. You're up marching. This is great, man. They must have been looking at you.
I have a red band in my bag, and I'll take my little red band and I'll stretch. I'll wrap it around my knees and I'll do little good girl, bad girls in my seat.
This is beautiful. This is, I mean, this is the kind of thing that somebody gets to their destination and says, oh, you got to hear this. There was some guy on the airplane. Little did we know.
Doing leg presses with a red band. Yeah. And I just noticed that I have to move a lot. I'm like the Tin Man without an oil can. If I'm sedentary for too long, I just start to freeze up.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great story, brother. I love it. There's probably people all around the world that are telling that story about you whipping out the little red band, doing the good girl, bad girls in your seat. That's great.
You can do shoulder pull aparts, and you can put it behind your back and chest presses. You know.
We're going to start a trend. Next thing you know, they're going to start banning. You know, you're going to start this whole movement. Next thing you know, they're going to make sure they're going to look for your red band. You can't bring a red band on the plane anymore because too many people are doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
At the end of the day, you know, listen, you can't, with all these mandates that they have right now, you know, you got to wear a mask the whole time. You can only remove the mask when you're eating. So I think they would probably give him permission to use the red band because there's so much.
Yeah. I'm terrible. I fly a lot. You know, obviously I'm down in Albuquerque every other week. I have a partner in this adventure that goes the alternate week. So one of us is with Jon 7 days a week. So every weekend I'm on an airplane, which was typical anyhow, because when I was doing seminars, I've done over 200 seminars in 12 countries in all 50 states. I was on a plane nearly every weekend, fly out Friday, come home Sunday, for the better part of almost 3 years before COVID hit, and then all that shut down, of course. But I'm used to flying, but I hate those masks. So I ordered one off the internet. I forget where now because I ordered like a 6-pack of them. It's like a fishnet. You can see your nose and mouth through the mask. It's like you don't even have a mask on, but it's black. And when it's right up against your face, you can't really tell, but you can see right through it if you hold it up. And I wear that on the plane because it doesn't impair my breathing. And so I'm a little more comfortable.
Smart.
That's very smart, brother. Very smart.
On that note, I was just down in Miami at a seminar with a guy by the name of Dr. Pat Davidson, PhD in exercise phys. Extraordinary guy, just brilliant guy. And then a guy that he partnered with is Jordan, the Muscle Doc. Some of you may know him as the Muscle Doc. He's a chiropractor. These guys are fantastic, but I flew all the way down to Steffi Cohn's gym in Miami just so I could spend the weekend with them and just learning from them. It was just an educational opportunity for me. And I laugh sometimes when people complain that my ebook is $100 on my website. And I'm like, you couldn't hire a good trainer for 1 hour for $100. And I've spent tens of thousands of dollars and decades of my life putting everything I had into that fucking ebook. And some guys get fined with $100, you know. And I go to these seminars, you know, and that seminar was $1,000. It cost me $1,000. Plus I had to fly to Miami and stay in a hotel, and just so I could learn some more stuff to be able to then bring that back to my clients or my audience. And But the point of the story was this, and I mentioned this before. One of the biggest things that I try and do about my compliance, this is both for dieters and for athletes, is meal prep. And I think people know that the Vertical Diet has a meal prep company, and I've been distributing meals nationwide for a few years now, where I make low FODMAP meals with bone broth and, bison monster mash and a whole host of other menu items. And they're delicious. I don't even make my own food anymore. The meal prep company sends them, and I have to buy them too. I only get, a discount. But I took a rolling Coleman cooler. Matter of fact, it's sitting right here next to me. It's an igloo. And I'll pack, I knew I had to fly out Friday and I wasn't home until Monday night. So that's 4 days, and I need 5 meals a day. So I had to take 20 meals with me. And fortunately, because, I order meal prep, I just pulled 20 meals out of the freezer and I popped them into this rolling igloo cooler. And I threw, my CPAP and some clothes and shoes on top of that. And I closed the cooler and put a tie down on it, a little ratchet tie down. And I checked it onto the plane. And then I always stay at an extended stay, that has a microwave and a fridge and a little mini kitchenette thing.
Yep.
And I had all my meals, and then I take with me these thermos. They're just, tin can thermos, and I'll heat up a meal. I always heat up, depending on how long the flight is, I'll heat up a meal or 2 or 3. I heated up 5 when I flew to Moscow because it was a 20-hour trip with layovers.
That's all?
And, yeah, no kidding.
Brian used to travel with like 12 of those things.
I know.
It'd take us 20 minutes to get through security.
You have to open it up and show them at security. You got to show them that it's not liquid. That it's, I'm like, it's rice and burger and rice. But so some people I tell this to, I never miss a meal, and I eat the food that I want with the macro percentages I like, that feels good on my stomach. And I don't have to forage for stuff at room service or at the airport and, end up sprinting to the bathroom with, all the problems that occur when you're eating seed oils and crap like that don't agree with me. But it saved me. I went to one dinner with a few of the guys that were down there, and it was like well over $100, just my part. The tab was like $500 for all of us. And I'm like, and people complain because I had steak that was, I think I retail it for like $12.50. And I ate steak 5 times a day, all 4 days, for a steal for $70 a day was my food stipend, really. And then I threw in some oranges, and since I had the cooler, I threw in a thing of Greek yogurt and a bag of frozen strawberries. And so I had everything I needed the whole weekend. I never missed a meal, and I was able to travel to Miami and home, and I always pack my meals. It's probably one of the biggest life-changing tips that I try and provide for people, along with the CPAP and the getting adequate sodium intake and little things like that they just make a huge difference in terms of somebody's ability to comply with whatever program that they're on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, brother, we've taken a lot of your time, and we really want to thank you for being on the show. But before we let you go, you've made such a big impact on, not only people, but the industry, everything from business to bodybuilding to powerlifting. What is it, with all that you've accomplished and all the successes you've had, what is the legacy you want to leave behind? What is Stan Efferding leaving behind?
Well, with respect to the industry, I've really tried hard. I'm not the brightest guy in the industry. There's a lot of academic professionals I follow and listen to. I really wanted to help other people. I always said, if I knew then what I know now, it's like Nick said, we could have saved 15 years of hassle. I've really tried to put out a lot of information, a lot of free information. I did an entire seminar, a 2-hour seminar in Iceland with Hofthor that goes over my entire diet. It's got almost 7 million views now. And then I've got all those Rhino's rants that I was referring to today, and you could just binge watch those. I spent a lot of time writing those and researching them to make sure I was giving out, reasonable information. I'm not right about everything, but there's a lot of good, helpful information in there. And so as far as the industry goes, I enjoy it. I make a lot of posts on my Instagram of people who use the word life-changing, and it really, humbles and flatters me. And that's the most rewarding in terms of my contribution to the industry, is that I can help other people do this, with the information that I didn't have, and just make their life a little easier, and make them more successful in their pursuit. Beyond that, I think, when I had my kids, I had kids late. I've got a 7 and a 9-year-old. And, the one thing I learned as soon as they were born, because previous to that, I'd just been competing all my life, since 1986. The one thing you learn when you have kids is you're just not the most important person in the world anymore.
Nope.
Up until that point, I had that mindset. Yeah. It was all about my goals and my future. But I read a great book by Jordan Peterson. If you guys are familiar with the psychiatrist out of Canada, who's gotten very popular, brilliant guy. And I think one of the chapters in the book says, "Don't raise kids you hate." He says,
there we go.
Other people will hate them too. And so my legacy is really just now invested in trying to make sure that I raise, smart, confident, capable children. And that's my total focus now. I can't wait to get home to them. I enjoy doing what I do, but there's nothing like coming home and seeing your kids and trying to give them all the information and the opportunity and the education that maybe you felt like you maybe didn't get enough for yourself, and I was certainly afforded plenty of opportunities in my life, but I just think that we've acquired so much knowledge now. We want to pass it on and see, and watch them do even better than we did, whatever sport, or career they choose. So that's the career, or that's the industry, and kind of what I'm focused on now, just in my personal life.
Yeah. Well, very cool, brother. We love having you on. Nick, Ockham, you guys have anything else before we jump out of here?
He's been a wealth of information. I've really enjoyed hearing him speak, and I've learned a lot, about the importance of blood work, and I'm sure all the viewers are going to take that into consideration and get blood work done more often. So thank you so much, Stan, for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I've learned a ton from you. It's one of the reasons why I can still do what I do. And I can't explain how grateful I am to you, because I kind of ate sort of that way, but the fine tuning of it just made it the world of difference. And I really do appreciate that. And I thank you for it.
That's
and
awesome.
It's amazing you're making people healthier in this industry. And that goes miles. And you're making people healthier just in general, because if people ate more the way you did, we wouldn't have obesity problems.
Yeah.
And it's an easy diet to eat, and it's not difficult. It's fun to eat. I think it's fun to eat. So anyway, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I just want to remind folks, go to stanefferding.com and scroll down to blood test. I don't make anything. There's a link there where you can go to merrickhealth.com and get a blood test. The budget blood test that I just typed up today and showed you the little paper of, just DM me at Stan Efferding on my Instagram, and I'll just copy and paste this for you. And you can, it's $100, man. Go get a blood test, get your blood pressure checked. If you got any questions, or if you've got a loved one, if you're the wife of a husband who's deep into this pursuit that he's so passionate about, and maybe he's got his head in his sand about some of the health issues. If he snores and wakes up tired, if you hear him breathing a little heavy, or if you're concerned about his blood pressure, reach out to me, because we'll do everything we can to get people to make a few minor changes that'll help keep them around longer. So, thanks you guys for the opportunity, the platform to speak to your audience.
Absolutely, brother.
Absolutely.
Well, on behalf of us and behalf of all the people's lives you changed, we want to say thank you very much. And that's going to be our show for the day. So everybody, thank you for viewing. This is Legends of Iron. We will see you next time.
Yeah.
Legends of Iron is brought to you by Muscle Mints. Muscle Mints is the creator of Carnivore. Beef builds muscle, and Carnivore is the world's #1 selling beef protein.